About 23 hours after we started in the lounge at Union Station in Chicago, our TRE train was nearing Victory Station, the transfer point to our next ride aboard DART's Green Line, to Trinity Mills Station, and then on to DCTA's A-Train, to Highland Village Station. I first rode DART light rail over 2 years ago. In January 2023, this was a rough and unclean metro system. Stations and trains were much less than clean, and that's being fairly forgiving of the particular things we experienced back then. 2 years later, DART's Victory Station is looking and smelling much better. On this particularly windy day, there's an abundance of fresh air and sunshine. There was also an abundance of delays due to single-track operation on the LRT west of this station. DART's rail cars have recently been refurbished to replace each car's middle bogie with a low-level boarding section. While they're noticeably cleaner than my first visit, the cars still have that baked-in aroma of humanity. The air conditioning is working all right, so they're a relatively tolerable setting for our outbound trip today. The Green Line is the second newest line currently operating in DART's LRT system. The history of light rail goes back over 3 decades in Dallas and has extended out to a handful of suburbs over the years. I hadn't used the Green Line much in my previous visit, more often the red and blue lines back then. We're taking it today because the commuter rail train to Denton originates in Carrollton, one stop before the end of the Green Line. Planned and constructed in the first decade of the 21st century, this line runs from downtown Dallas to Love Field, at first running parallel to TRE's trackage, then later turning away to call on stations across West Dallas. The stations on this portion of the line are also served by Orange Line trains bound to and from DFW Airport. Overall, this makes for a better than average frequency of trains across a decidedly less gentrified part of town. It's personally nice to see trains elevated above streets, highways, and in between neighborhoods sequenced to alternate with industrial property. This area is a less modern example of sprawl around Dallas. Much of the expansion in this region is happening beyond the reach of DART, DCTA, and Trinity Metro, the agencies which make up the big players in public transit here. A lot of state and federal funding had been used toward expansion of DART over the decades. And that's come under scrutiny in the current fiscal climate. The Silver Line project that will create a crosstown transit line running east from DFW Airport and bypassing downtown Dallas, that kind of fringe corridor project is rarely seen across Middle America, let alone plenty of cities on the coast as well. It's approaching completion, but its opening date has been pushed back a year. This is all to say the character of the public transit map in Dallas is much different in the 2020s than has ever been in the modern era. Looking at the DART system map, you get a sense of how sparsely the bus routes are for a city of Dallas's size. What's gone down over this decade is DART has transitioned first or final miles of folks' commutes from regular bus routes to a microtransit system branded as an on-demand service. With their phone app, you can plan trips that call upon DART's network of paratransit vehicles, the ones that aren't momentarily serving transit users with mobility needs, to pick you up from your home or wherever in a set of neighborhoods you may be, and drop you off with fare activated for a regular bus route or light rail segment of your trip. From your destination rail station, either a walk or additional ride to your ultimate destination is in order. And if you opt in on the app, you'll also have ride-sharing service drivers at your disposal. Within this system, there is innovative appeal, but as I discussed in the car sand video, microtransit is more difficult to justify on the basis of trying to cover more ridership and cut costs of running more buses. While the use of the system limited to neighborhoods around train lines seems to cover that base, the widely accepted reasoning in the world of public transit is that higher capacity vehicles, especially energy efficient transit vehicles, are the best utilizers of public funds. Farming out final mile transit to Lyft drivers is a catchy idea, but it moves fewer people than a bus can. The paratransit vehicles may, at the time of the on-demand service need, have no passengers to serve and thus be better utilizing themselves in theory, but pressing them into higher levels of service will create more wear on already publicly funded vehicles over their intended scope of use. Personally, I benefited from the on-demand services when I was last in Dallas, as those ride segments were a great deal more tolerable than the light rail often was. A sort of side-eyed saving grace, if you will, that got me back in town to give DART another try after a couple of years. I'll be coming back to Dallas this October to get into this odd blend of transit choices when I'm not in such a tight time frame as I was today, and the weather's hopefully tolerably warm. As for today, it's just our Green Line trains running independently on this old Katy Line right-of-way. If the developers of the Green Line were hoping to plant the seeds of gentrified development with this new line, it appears they are only seeing their ideals take hold sporadically into the suburbs of Farmers Branch and Carrollton. Ridership was good for a mid-afternoon Monday outbound train, with a number of folks exiting and boarding at each station. Nobody on board was acting out, and the time we spent on board was tolerable and felt relatively safe. Along the line, there are a few places a tourist might frequent on the Green Line, but locals on board seem to have shopping bags somewhat frequently, so there's hope that this train is serving something like its intended purpose. I think the opening of the Silver Line through Carrollton to DFW will see ridership boosted on this line, possibly to the effect of necessitating more regular bus routes out here. I just don't think the microtransit proposition of handing off services to smaller vehicles will streamline DART's operating expenses in the way they've guessed it will happen. If more riders were to come into the system based on the convenience of on-demand service from their homes, that'll end up multiplying the cost inefficiencies inherent to running more smaller vehicles than regular route buses or trains. Dallas maintains more light rail lines than most cities outside the coast, and in that network they are being challenged to continue operating as presently configured, let alone with future expansions. This Green Line performs much above my previously set expectations for transit in Dallas. Out here in the suburbs, it's a good anchor option to have for folks who need it, and with the Silver Line soon to open next year, it ought to continue to see ridership grow as the beginnings of a regional transit system take shape. Part of that regional transit system lies ahead of us at Trinity Mills Station. The Denton County Transportation Authority owns the A-Train service from Carrollton to Denton. Or is it pronounced A-Train? It is the only commuter rail train in DFW that doesn't operate into either Dallas or Fort Worth, a testament to the expansion of communities in Dallas's north suburbs.
Dots.
These Stadler GTW DMUs are similar to their Flirt models that run on TexRail and the future Silver Line. They're very much a commuter model specifically for shorter trips such as the 21-mile route on the last part of our trip today. The A-Train continues on the old Katy line past the terminus of the Green Line. While the territory of this train is more visually suburban, the line operates with similar frequency to DART trains on weekdays, with reduced service on Saturday.
Reminder, you must have a valid fare item before boarding. No eating or smoking is allowed while on board. Next station, Hebron. Gracias por usar el A-Train.
Like TRE, there is no Sunday A-Train service. Any other day, it frees up commuters looking to head into Dallas City proper from Denton, perhaps to attend events, or head to either airport. The stations on the A-Train are all a blend of park and rides alongside some higher density development with some great nature behind the micro-dotted wraps found on our side of the train. Fares are separate from DART but can be covered with a $3 payment or the purchase of a regional day pass. That the stations it calls on are within central business districts as well as adjacent to decent amounts of residential development ought to make the A-Train a good alternative to traffic stacked up on freeways and toll roads. It's the overall short length of the line that most likely sees a majority of commuters choosing to simply continue on their way in their personal vehicles into Dallas. Considering the average frequency of connecting trains throughout the region being lower and on-demand final mile services or buses adding to folks' perceived impression of public transit as too convoluted to meet their needs, unless the parking is sparse or too expensive for their tastes, only then, as it often is in North America, is passenger rail worth the time, investment, and experience of stepping into a new comfort zone with routines to learn. This had been a really pleasant set of trains to take on our way to Lewisville, for which we alighted at Highland Village Station with too many bags being negotiated to record a finale. So these tarmac scenes from our journey out of Dallas the next day at DFW Airport will have to suffice. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate you coming along with me on these trips. Leave a comment if you've used the Green Line or other transit in Dallas, so I might be able to use that as a jumping off point for my next trip out here. Our next transit tourism trip will find us on the Cincinnati Connector streetcar in another week. Till then, check out this other video, and I'll see you on our next trip.